and Bergs. Join us as we explore the fascinating shipwrecks of the Northeast by diving Wreck Valley.
Welcome to Dive Wreck Valley. On a previous episode, we covered the complete history and sinking of the USS Algol. Today we're going to take you back to the wreck and show you how we recovered this auxiliary steering helm from an aft steering station. So stay with us. Dive Wreck Valley will be right back. The new Aqua Explorer dive reel is a 5-inch diameter reel that contains almost 300 feet of a 1/8 diamond-braided nylon line. This reel's heavy-duty anodized aluminum construction with all stainless steel hardware is made specifically for the rigors of saltwater wreck diving. Accept no substitutes. Ask for the Aqua Explorer wreck reel at your local dive store or call Aqua Explorers at 516-868-2658. The Wreck Valley dive team arrives in Brielle, New Jersey at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Joining me today are Captain George Hoffman, owner of the Sealion, Captain Kevin Brennan, who operates the Sealion, underwater cinematographers Steve Belinda and Joseph Koppelman, my dive partner Hank Garvin, and divers Steve Lombardo, Janet Beezer, Mark Patterson, and Don Woolley. Once all the gear is safely and securely stored, it's time to cast off and be on our way. The Sealion is a 36-foot main coaster. This custom dive vessel is owned and operated by Captain George Hoffman, one of the most experienced wreck divers on the East Coast. George runs the Sealion out of Manasquan Inlet, New Jersey. From here, he has a huge selection of wreck sites to choose from. The Sealion runs weekend and weekday wreck diving charters year-round. For further information on diving off the Sealion, contact Captain George Hoffman at 908-528-6298. Now let's take a quick look at the history of the Algol and some scenes from our first episode of the Algol sinking. The Algol was a World War II attack cargo vessel. She was 459 feet long, had a 63-foot beam, and displaced 6,830 tons. She was powered by a single-screw double reduction turbine and had a top speed of 16.5 knots. The Algol was launched by the Moore Dry Dock Company of Oakland, California on February 17, 1943. In 1991, the Algol was obtained by the state of New Jersey to be scuttled as an artificial reef. At 12:29 p.m. on Thursday, November 21st, 1991, charges that were strategically placed in her stern were detonated. Flames and a thick black cloud of smoke rose from the old Navy vessel. At first, the sinking was slow. After about 10 minutes, the Algol's stern finally went awash. Waves crashed over her deck and flooded her compartments. Air pockets caused water to be sprouted out of her stern. In fact, the Algol's stern had already hit the bottom, 125 feet below, before her bow finally slipped beneath the waves. She had rolled to the port as she went down and landed in the sand on her port side. When we originally explored the Algol, only minutes after her sinking, we found the vessel resting in 125 feet of water with a 45-degree list to port. As we ascended from this first dive, a huge burst of air hit the surface. We later discovered that the Algol had shifted. We speculated that the Algol's starboard side had been held buoyant from trapped air. When the wreck had purged enough air to make her starboard side negatively buoyant, the vessel shifted. Let's also take a look at the work and dives we've already put into this project. The Helm recovery project was actually started this past winter, when Hank Garvin and I started to correspond with two of the Algol's World War II crew members, Raleigh Brohl and Stanley Simmons. These crew members were able to send us not only historical photographs and blueprints of the wreck, but they were able to give us first-hand information as to the location of artifacts. They also told us that the auxiliary helm had been left on the Algol. The helm was located in the stern in a small room on the starboard side, 2 decks below our main deck. According to our plans, we would have to make our way to the stern, then directly under her aft gun turret, swim down a staircase which would lead to a floor-mounted deck hatch. This deck hatch would take us down another level. Lastly, we would need to make our way to the ship's starboard side to find the helm. Hank and I immediately made plans to return to the Algol and attempt to recover her helm. At first, we thought this was going to be an easy project, requiring only 2 trips or so for the recovery. The first would be an exploratory dive in order to find the room and see exactly what tools were needed for the wheel's removal. On the second trip, we would send the helm to the surface. Well, Hank and I soon learned that this was not going to be the case. This artifact would require over 7 trips, 14 dives, a lot of hard work and frustration in order to recover.
Explore the shipwrecks off New York and New Jersey in Dan Bergs' Wreck Valley Volume 2 book for $18.95. Or try Dan's exciting new how-to book on wreck diving, titled Shipwreck Diving, for $12.95. Both books are heavily illustrated in full color. Send check plus $3 postage and handling to Aqua Explorers Inc., 516-868-2658. Call for our free catalog.
Our first trip to the wreck went pretty much as planned. We descended through the chilly Atlantic in the early spring of 1992 to find the Algol sitting perfectly upright. Fish have already started to move in, and her deck has become literally covered with thousands of tiny scallops that seem to jump off the deck as a diver approaches. We noticed a valve wheel that we had first seen months ago that is now completely covered with marine growth. The Algol is destined to become one of the most popular sites for divers within Wreck Valley. Visibility is consistently excellent, and there are artifacts almost everywhere you look. Brass tags like these, as well as cage lamps and lights, are only a small sample. Our anchor had landed amidships, so we started to head astern along the vessel's starboard side. Within no time at all, we had located the first hatch and staircase leading into the wreck. Please remember that penetration into any overhead environment requires advanced training and experience. Without this experience, divers could easily get lost inside the dark, silty interior. As we descend down the stairs, we spot the next deck hatch that will lead us deeper into the wreck. Before entering this hatch, we check to see that it's held open securely. This is the only way in, as well as the only exit route from the wreck, so we want to make sure that it won't close accidentally. Hank then leads the way down through this deck hatch. You will note that Hank and I are both wearing double Genesis 120 cubic foot tanks secured with Velcro double bands during most of our working dives. This setup provides an adequate amount of air for the working depth of 120 feet. We are also both wearing dry suits due to the temperature of the water and the duration of the dives. We now have to swim to the starboard side of the wreck, but passage is blocked by some hanging conduit pipe. Hank decides to take the time now to cut away this pipe so that our exit later will be unobstructed. After a few minutes, the pipe is removed. It's now time for me to descend through the deck hatch, and together we start to maneuver through the silt towards the wreck's starboard side. We are both surprised at the amount of silt already covering the floor of the Algol after only a few months underwater. We realize that filming is not going to be easy, especially after seeing not only the silt, but the small size of the room. The double-wheeled helm is right where we were told it would be. I don't know about Hank, but the excitement makes me feel like a little kid in a candy store. A ship's helm is a sought-after prized artifact for divers, and this is one of the only ones I've ever found on a wreck. The helm's double wheels are also quite nice. Each is marked Webster Brinkley & Company, Seattle, USA. Unfortunately, the wheels were not made of brass or bronze, as we had originally hoped. But we decide to go ahead with the project anyway, and we'll consider preservation and display options later. After closer inspection, we find that each wheel of the helm is mounted on a straight shaft with a keyway. Each wheel also has an Allen screw perpendicular to the keyway. At this point, the job still looks simple. We will return with an Allen wrench and a wheel puller and remove one helm wheel at a time. This way we won't have any difficulty maneuvering the wheels up and out through the slightly small deck hatch.
After our second trip to the wreck, we began to realize that this project was going to be just a little bit more difficult than originally expected. Although I had brought the right size Allen wrench, I couldn't remove the Allen screws because of their location. I would need to return to the wreck one more time, next time with an Allen key attached to a socket wrench with a 12-inch extension bar.
On the next two trips, we anchored near the bow and could not make the long swim astern, as well as the penetration required to work on the helm. Instead, we took the opportunity to explore the area around her forward cargo bay. This hatch leads to the crew's mess. On our first trip here, these huge stainless steel coffee pots were standing upright. But on our next visit, only 2 weeks later, they had been knocked over, either by a storm or possibly by other divers. We also relocated the fire alarm boxes, wall-mounted gong bell, and stainless steel sign we had first observed on the day the Algol went down. We also took a quick look around the Algol's pilot house. Even though the wreck had been stripped prior to her sinking, many small artifacts or trinkets remained for divers to recover. A favorite are these brass nameplates, many of which are dated and have a Navy anchor etched onto them.
For the next month, we attempted to return to the Algol several times, but bad weather repeatedly forced us back. When we finally did get to the wreck, we were once again stopped cold. Although I had sized the Allen key on my last dive and bought the corresponding socket extension tool, it didn't work. With just a little torque on the wrench, it had become apparent that the helm had been painted many times over the years, as the undersized Allen wrench just floated within a larger Allen screw. Once again, we were forced to abort the dive, having accomplished absolutely nothing.
A few weeks later, we were back on the site. This time, we took no chances at all. I brought an entire set of Allen key socket extensions. My job would be to remove the Allen screws while Hank attached the wheel puller. This time, I entered the room first. This was my first clear view of the helm without having kicked up the silt. Everything went like clockwork. As Hank was making his way into the room, I already had both screws out. The wheel puller mounted perfectly, with its two arms grabbing the outside diameter of the wheel's hub and the center screw pushing in on the steel shaft. But then no matter how much force we applied to the wrench, the wheel would not separate from its shaft. To say the least, this was getting ridiculous, and once again Hank and I had to ascend with nothing to show for our efforts.
We decided to give the project just one more try. I called Captain George Hoffman, who runs the Sealion out of New Jersey. The wreck is only a 16-mile cruise for him, rather than the 33 miles from Long Island. Plus, George has assured me that he'll anchor the Sealion within a few feet of our entry hole. Therefore, we won't waste any precious bottom time while we navigate to the hatch.
So here we are aboard the Sealion, anxiously awaiting the dive that will hopefully conclude this project. Within only a few minutes of reaching the site, Captain George uses his electronics to determine our exact location over the wreck and drops a marker buoy for reference. I wanted to be hooked into the gun turret, which is directly above our entry hatch. A few minutes later, the hook is dropped and it's time to go diving. Don Woolley jumps in first to secure the grapple into the wreck. When I descend, I'm amazed to find that George had anchored exactly where we wanted to be. With me, I brought a 3-foot extension bar and a 12-pound sledgehammer, figuring that the wheel puller just needed a little bit more persuasion. Unfortunately, no matter how much I pound on the bar, the wheel will still not separate from its shaft. I quickly go to plan B and remove the 4 nuts attaching the cover from the helm stand.
At this point, the silt reduced visibility to 0 and prevented further filming. Beneath the helm cover, I find 4 additional nuts attaching the bearing pillow blocks. These 2 are quickly removed, and now the helm is only held on by a chain looping over its sprocket. But no problem, we had brought hacksaws and quickly went to work. Within a short time, we went through the chain. Finally, the helm was free, and now we dragged it back across the wreck to the hatch, leaving only its helm stand in an otherwise empty room.
Now we have to get the heavy artifact up the stairs. This in itself is going to be no easy task. Neither one of us want to stay below to guide the Helm out, fearing it will get stuck in the opening and trap us below. We hook up a lift bag to take some of the weight off the artifact, then ascend. Hank goes back in head first and tries to pull the Helm out. While Hank is still face down in the hole, I notice that the top of our lift bag has become lodged in an open circular escape hatch. With a little pushing and pulling, the bag is released and the Helm is finally free. As we slowly start to pull the Helm over to the next deck opening, we check our gauges to find there's no bottom time left. All certified divers know that it's extremely important to plan your dive and dive your plan. This is especially important on these working dives that are beyond the realm of normal recreational diving. Having the discipline to leave the Helm and once again surface with nothing to show for our efforts, instead of pushing the predetermined safety limits, was not a decision, it was mandatory. As Hank and I ascend towards the surface in our first safety decompression stop, we can only hope that Mark Patterson sees the Helm and sends it up for us. Mark's job on this dive as a mate aboard the Sealion was to pull the hook. However, he told us he would check the hole to see if we needed any help before releasing the Sealion. And now we are counting on him. True to his word, Mark swims over the deck hole and spots the Helm that we had left on the deck below. Within a few minutes, he's busy rigging the two subsalve lift bags and an upline. The lift bags will raise the Helm, while the upline will prevent the bag from floating away once on the surface. Once the rigging is completed, Mark adds a little air to the bags and begins to guide the wheels up through a large hole in the Algol's main deck. Once the Helm is on the main deck, Mark utilizes the deck as a staging area and takes the time to make sure that all the rigging lines are secured and that none have snagged into any of his dive gear. Once everything has been checked, he then adds the additional air needed to send the Helm to the surface. Visibility today is exceptional, and Mark watches the bag until it almost reaches the surface, over 100 feet above. Back aboard the Sealion, our dive team is anxiously waiting as the bag hits the surface. After over 4 months of hard work and frustration, the Helm is finally hoisted safely aboard the Sealion.
We got the wheel.
These tags are all over the place. It's one thing nice about a military ship. Warning, 240 volts. Military ships mark everything, so nobody makes a mistake of what they are.
And what are you going to do with those things?
Well, Danny had asked me to pick up some of these tags so we can give it to some of the fellas who served on the Algol and send them out to them. So they should really enjoy them.
It was touch and go there for a little while. You know, Hank and I went down into the room, and everything went pretty much as planned. I tried to get the wheel off with the wheel puller. It just wouldn't come. We reverted to plan B. I unbolted the cover from the helm stand, which exposed 4 bolts on pillow blocks. Took those nuts and bolts off fairly quickly, but then we were left with a very heavy monstrosity.
Get out of that
Fairly deep in the wreck. Hank and I lugged it over, and getting it up the stairs was was quite a treat. So I came up, Hank came up, and then Hank went back in head first, and I held on to his legs. And with the lift bag helping us, we were able to pull it out. But then we looked at our mile timers, and we were out of time. So we left it down there. Came back up to the surface. While we were hanging, we saw a bunch of bubbles pass by. So we assumed that Mark, as per our original plan, would take a look-see in that hole, and if it was still there, he would send it up for us. So it looks like Mark did his job and sent up the Helm. Was this 14, 15 dives, Hank?
Something like that.
14 or 15 dives on one artifact. 2 artifacts is 2 weeks.
That's right.
Well, good job.
Good day.
As we start to cruise back to New Jersey, I attempt to remove the wheel puller, which I had pounded into place underwater. Not to my surprise, it doesn't budge at all. Hank, who is a bit bigger and stronger than I, also attempts, but still it doesn't move. Apparently, it was not from lack of tension that the wheels didn't slide off their shafts. The two similar metals of the wheels and the shaft seem to have become permanently bonded. After a little discussion, both Hank and I decide to have the wheels brass-plated. This process is not only for display reasons, but will also preserve the steel wheels and prevent them from rusting. Still offshore, a small bird lands on the Sealion to rest for a while. The bird seems to like Steve Lombardo's head as a perch.
Don't go away. Dive Wreck Valley will be right back.
Just hang right in.
The new Aqua Explorer dive reel is a 5-inch diameter reel that contains almost 300 feet of a 1/8 diamond-braided nylon line. This reel's heavy-duty anodized aluminum construction with all stainless steel hardware is made specifically for the rigors of saltwater wreck diving. Accept no substitutes. Ask for the Aqua Explorer wreck reel at your local dive store or call Aqua Explorers at 516-868-2658. The first step in preserving the wheels is to sandblast off all the old layers of paint. This is a tiresome, time-consuming job, but it must be done meticulously. We also utilize torches to separate the two wheels. This way both Hank and I will each get an artifact for all our efforts. We then bring the wheels to Spectrum Electroplating in Farmingdale, where they are first zinc plated in an electrolysis bath. After the zinc plating is completed, the wheels are each lowered into a brass electrolysis bath. Within a short time, the wheels are taken out. The next step is to spray the wheels with a clear enamel coating, which will later be baked on. The finished pieces will be proudly displayed along with other shipwreck artifacts recovered from an area known as Wreck Valley. As a side note, although Hank and I are not quite ready to begin another Algol project immediately, former crew members Raleigh Brohl and Stan Simmons have already informed us of the location of 2 gyro compasses in binnacles, as well as assorted other artifacts. Who knows what ambition the new dive season may bring. For further information on the shipwrecks off New York and New Jersey, pick up a copy of Dan Bergs' Wreck Valley Volume 2 book at your local dive store. Or to learn about the skills of wreck diving, try Dan's how-to book titled Shipwreck Diving. To order a VHS copy of the Dive Wreck Valley show or a free color book catalog, call Aqua Explorers Incorporated at 516-868-2658. Dan Berg's Dive Wreck Valley is sponsored by Amphibico Video Housings, Dewey Dry Suits, Sherwood Scuba Equipment, Subsal USA Lift Bags, Beneath the Sea, the largest retail dive show in the U.S., Boston Sea Rovers, the Sub-Aqua Journal, Underwater USA, America's first newspaper for divers, the research vessel Wahoo, Seahorse Dive Shop in Queens, Kings County Divers in Brooklyn, the Scuba Shoppy in Medford, Harvey's Sports Shop in Sheepshead Bay, Danny's Dive Shop in Baldwin, the Enchanted Diver in Floral Park, Ocean Rock in Bohemia, Tiedemann's Diving Center in Levittown, and Divers Way in Bayshore. I hope you've enjoyed the show and will join us again as we continue to explore the shipwrecks off New York and New Jersey by diving in an area known as Wreck Valley.